Welcome to Morgan's Game Therapy, a channel where you listen to a random stranger on the internet talk about ttrpgs and give unsolicited advice on problems that don't concern me. I hope your day-night weekend is going well, and I hope you enjoy the video. There goes my schedule out the window. Honestly, I was supposed to record this video last week, but then my throat decided to die on me and I lost my voice. It's mostly back, but if I sound weird in this video, that's probably why. I'm still having a bit of a cough and, I'm gonna have to record these videos piecemeal so I don't completely lose my voice again, but hopefully this isn't too chopped up for it to be enjoyable. Without further ado, let's get on with today's video. DM tells player to stop separating from party, gets punished, and it escalates. By Affectinatiato. Hey there! I've been reading horror stories for a while now, and I'd like to share something that happened to me. I know this isn't meant to be an AITA kind of thing. I just wanted some general advice on how I handled this, and to vent about this situation since it gets on my mind a lot. I won't say too much about our campaign/characters, as they're not too relevant. Only one of the players. We'll call him Sean, not his real name. So, to summarize as best as I can, this player has a bad habit of wandering off without telling anyone. For context, we play on VTT, a virtual tabletop, and I both create and use battle maps for character tokens to walk around. If we're RPing out a scene, he might be 3 rooms over from where the party is, where I had events planned to RP out, but they become redundant because he doesn't bother waiting for other people. I made it very clear since session 2 that I heavily dislike this, but I didn't make it an official ruling, as this is a ttrpg group of close friends. We're all mature adults and generally understand that if someone tells you to stop doing something because they don't like it, then stop doing it. Whenever I stated this habit of Sean with him wandering around, I made sure my dislike of it was very well known, told people to stop it, and through the campaign, they did it anyway. In all fairness, most of the party did it, but Sean was the biggest repeat offender of this. Now, I tried to be fair, but by session 9 or 10, he was still doing it. At this point, I was getting really peeved, and decided to stop trying to be friendly and start hashing out punishments. The only circumstance I'd allow separation is if the party stated it clearly, like, hey, while player 1 and player 2 is doing that, I'm going over to the next room over here to check what's in the closet. And that's fine with me. As long as the intention is communicated, I don't mind separation in that regard, or if they want something more private without the players knowing, they would DM me with their intentions. But Sean clearly did it whenever the scene didn't revolve around him, or when he was bored, and never bothered to communicate when he did it. So, when Sean inevitably did it again, I was prepared. I wrote notes that 2 NPC characters in discussion would have preferred to not be eavesdropped/rudely walked in on, and if anyone waited outside the room/got close to it with passive insight or perception, which most of the party had a good number of, I would have easily let them know this. However, Sean, doing what he does best, waltzed right in on a meeting between 2 nobles that the party spent several sessions getting a good rapport with. And shuffling in the background is my cat. I am sorry if you can hear that. Ponchik is being very disruptive right now. Buddy, stop that. And I clearly stated that by doing this alone, they just lost all credibility with them due to the lack of social etiquette of no knocking/thinking he walks around like he owns the place. I made this punishment known publicly. Reiterated my dislike of people wandering off. In this case, Sean did it when one of the players was having OC issues with direction, so he clearly didn't bother to wait or cared about their party member having issues. What happened next? Sean turned off his camera and stayed quiet for a good chunk of the session. A day later, I get a DM from him wanting to sort out what happened last session. And basically, he wrote in on the notion that everyone was punished for his mess up and that he didn't know it was suddenly a rule. I explained my reasoning, i.e. to start a general deterrence to separation without communication, and that I have stated over a dozen times for people to stop doing it, and yet he did it anyway. He stuck hard to the point of, "So you're going to punish me for a rule I knew nothing about? I don't think it's fair to the other players." And I bounced back by saying, as a close group of friends, I would think that after stating my dislike of character separation so many times, and as a close friend of mine, you should respect me enough to stop doing it, but here we are. We butt heads for several minutes, but TLDR, I stuck hard to the point of deterrence, and that separation is okay if communicated. But doing it when others are already doing something, i.e. a scene or having issues, isn't acceptable. He stuck hard to the point of it wasn't a rule, and we eventually agreed to disagree, and he said he'd drop out of my game. I also made sure he knew that while he was the one that did it the most, he wasn't the only one that did it, so this punishment served as a warning to the other players as well. Closed and shut, right? A bit of drama here, and the game could proceed. Nope. I'm in other games with Sean as a player, and the GMs of those games had to cancel their games last minute because Sean communicated at the last minute he wasn't joining, that he was too tired from work or whatever excuse he made. A mutual friend told me that the real reason is because I'm in the game, and that he can't be around me at that time. Which brings me to my second point. That same mutual friend, in confidence, told me a few things that really opened my eyes to how little Sean really respected me. He told me the following things. He cheated on his stats. Instead of rolling for them or doing standard array, he manually set them up. His balance, as he liked to call it, was doing 18, 16, 15, 14, 13, and 12. He did not communicate that he did this at all, and I went into his D&D Beyond sheet to confirm that he did, in fact, do this. My fault for not checking my player sheets, as I trusted them enough to not do anything like this. Apparently, he did this in his other games as well. Almost every week, if not every other week, Sean liked to have private VCs with some of our mutual friends. In those sessions, he always talked badly about me as a player and as a DM, and always threatened to leave my campaign, and that my characters had no substance / that I put no real effort into them. I have a short attention span, and I am self-aware of that, but I try to RP and do my part as best as I can. I got self-conscious thanks to this, and even asked other players if they felt in a similar way, obviously without implicating Sean. They said they had no issues, that maybe I was a bit reserved sometimes, but not a problem player by any means, or hard to interact with. I trusted these friends to tell me the truth if they felt differently, since some of them have a no BS attitude. I felt really hurt by this. If Sean had such an issue with the campaigns in session 1, why not communicate that to me? To me, Sean felt incredibly two-faced at this point. At first, after our argument about the separation from the party, it did leave a bad taste in our mouths, but we did agree that we could eventually move on from it, even if he didn't agree with what I did. Now, I just felt like I wanted nothing to do with him. There are admittedly other underlying issues with him from IRL that I am critical of, but we were always good friends and mindful of each other's flaws. But after finding all of this out, I took several days to really think about what to do next. Because of point 2 above, and I already know that he's a gossiper, I had a good feeling that he would try to stir the pot with our mutual friends, both in the games I'm playing and the game I'm GMing. I told my mutual friend that I'd like to broadcast a general message that instead of giving Sean a chance to formally quit, that I would kick him instead, and I would message every player an explanation of why, mainly about the separation aspect and him talking behind my back and disrespecting me. Mutual friend was reluctant initially, but when I put the message into writing, he also started to realize how toxic Sean really was, the word toxic being in his own words. With his permission to share what he told me in confidence, I kicked Sean and the message was sent. Not even 2 hours later, Sean launched right into my DMs, demanding an apology for calling him a toxic player in my written message and airing that out to everyone. I decided to try and talk with him instead of just getting into an argument with him, that I found out he cheated his stats, finding out that he talked badly about me in such a negative way behind my back and not communicating these issues to me instead, and that I did have other reasons, mainly the IRL flaws I mentioned earlier. But I don't want to turn this into a blame shift, just that we both messed up in ways. That I should have been a better DM about the separation, made an actual rule just for the sake of closure for both of us. In the heat of the moment, I really wanted us to be friends again. I caved in from stern DM to being a friend again so easily, but I realized I don't hate Sean. I just want him to be better about what he did so it doesn't happen again. But that changed quickly when he apologized, quote unquote, back. 1. That he never was rude about this issue, and that he's sorry that I found out the way I did, and I should have never found out at all. 2. That in regards to the character stats, he's done that with every other game, and it shouldn't be surprising he did it in my game. Despite the fact that I made it clear in Session 0 that players can only do standard array or rolling for stats via D&D Beyond. But he can see how that can be considered cheating. 3. That he is sorry for not just talking to me about his issues. It felt like, to me, only the third point was the closest thing to an apology, but he downplayed the other 2 parts. I didn't get any closure from his side of us trying to make up, so when I went back to our mutual friend again just to make sure I'm not losing my sanity or I wasn't just being dramatic, he felt the same thing. There's no closure that he won't do it again. Ignore him. And with that, I just did. I left him on red, and the last thing I heard is that some people were distancing from him now, as our talk together spread around eventually, and that he went from having 4 games a week to only 1 per week. I don't know. A part of me feels like this could have been handled so much better, that I could have done better as both a friend and as a DM. This felt really blown over for something so stupidly small and simple, that it really shouldn't have escalated like it did, and I certainly didn't help in that regard. I'm open to everything. If I was the jerk, let me have it. I just need another opinion on this. I want to improve so something like this doesn't happen again. You know, you really had me rooting for Sean in the first bit. I was going to call OP an a-hole and call it a day. But after reading the whole story, I think this is a case of everybody sucks here. Sean sucks more than everyone else, but OP and the rest of the players aren't exactly shining pillars of innocence in this. First things first, if a rule is not a rule, then don't complain about people breaking it. It's mentioned several times that the OP made it clear that they didn't like the whole wandering off while everyone else is doing stuff thing. And I believe that, but did the other players understand how annoyed you were with it? If they were all doing it, this means that, assuming your friends aren't a-holes that disregard your feelings, they didn't get how upset you were over this. Or they didn't care. Assuming it's the first bit, I think this is the case of people just thinking that you're joking or not quite understanding how important this is to you because you're not making this a rule. This is why the idea of, oh, we're friends, they know me, they understand me, doesn't really work when you're playing a ttrpg or any game really. You should make your rules clear. You should establish your boundaries, clear cut, very straightforward. Otherwise, people are likely to break them. And I think it's fair, as much as I dislike Sean from the rest of the story, I do think it's fair for him to complain that he didn't know it was a rule, and why was it a rule all of a sudden? Just because you think something is clear doesn't make it actually clear to everyone else, and it wasn't a rule. He is correct. This is especially true because everyone else was doing it. So I can see him being upset that he was being punished for something that was universally allowed for a long time. It might feel to him or anyone else like he's being singled out when everyone else is allowed to do it. Yes, he is doing it the most, but that's subjective. He might not have seen it that way. He might have not noticed how often he's doing it. This might be a hot take, I don't know, but I definitely think the OP is to some degree an a-hole for not making their expectations clear, for not setting boundaries clearly, and for using in-game consequences for an essentially out-of-game problem. The problem isn't that the character is doing something. The problem is that the players are not listening to you. And you should never use in-game things for out-of-game things. That's just going to lead to resentment, misunderstandings. They're not going to know if this is something they did or something their character did. It's not a good idea. It doesn't, from this post, sound like the OP took Sean aside to say, hey, if you keep doing this, it will have an effect on the game and your character, which would have been a good way to get your point across and also give the guy a chance to think about his actions. Better yet, it would have been better to announce to the entire party, hey, this behavior isn't cool, I won't be allowing this at my table anymore. It should have been stated from the beginning if this is something that you know you're not okay with, but it's perfectly fine to set new rules as you go, as you discover things that you're maybe not comfortable with, that you don't want to be repeated. That's fine, but I have a big issue with the fact that OP didn't set the rule at all, which essentially just means you're allowing this behavior. It's not hard to set rules, can save you a whole world of trouble. Now, on the other hand, Sean is clearly an a-hole, and his problem goes well beyond running off while others are doing stuff. The guy seems to have main character syndrome. Sounds like what he's doing is trying to get attention while he isn't center stage. Him purposefully cheating on his stats and then saying that it should have been expected would have been enough to get him kicked from my table. And I think most tables, this would have at least been a major warning. Do something again, you get kicked out kind of situation. I understand that this kind of thing, kicking out people immediately, might be hard when you're playing with close friends, but let's be honest here for a second. If someone doesn't respect you enough to not cheat at a tabletop game you're running, they're probably not your friend, and you're better off without them. It's a basic trust thing, and he has broken trust. And if you can't trust him in a game, I don't think you should be able to trust him in real life. So he's just an a-hole in general. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Because then there is all the things Sean was doing out of game. Putting the GM hat aside for a minute, I am really sorry that the OP had to deal with such a shitty human being. Clearly, Sean is not your friend, and was probably never your friend. If someone goes behind your back to talk crap about you to your other friends, they're not even remotely friend material, and I'm sorry that OP had to find out this way, or deal with all of that at all. That really sucks. And the fact that Sean was only really sorry that he was caught, as demonstrated by the phrase, you should never have found out at all. Well, maybe you shouldn't have been doing it at all, right? It just shows that he doesn't give a damn, and he doesn't think it was wrong for him to do that, which is just the worst. Man, guy is an ass. Kudos to the mutual player for bringing this to you. I think their assessment of Sean as being a toxic player is spot on. He's not just a toxic player, he's a toxic person, and honestly, you're probably better off without him in your life. So, in a very strange, sad way, it's good that you found out. Your mutual friend is very brave to bring this up, probably knowing that this is how probably knowing that it's going to blow up in some way, because there's no way you can bring to someone the fact that one of their friends is talking behind their back and expect the person to be like, oh, well, yeah, life goes on. That just doesn't happen most of the time. So kudos to that friend. This is my PSA for the day. I get one per video. Very often in games where we play with friends, I see people putting up with shitty behavior because they're friends. They're better in real life. I've been guilty of this myself, as a player and even more so as a DM. There were times when I was scared of ruining my friendship with someone who was being a shitty person at the table, so I didn't do anything about the situation. But real friends don't suddenly stop being your friend when playing a game. If they're actively doing things that harm you or hurt you, if they refuse to listen to you when you tell them you're being hurt, they were likely never your friend, and they're just using the game to show off their true colors. No one deserves that. So don't allow that behavior to continue, especially if it happens out of game as well. I know in a lot of cases that's easier said than done, but I think it's important to remember that you should take care of yourself first, even if you're running the game. So yeah, that's my take on this. Everyone is an asshole here. OP didn't make his boundaries clear enough and used in-game punishment for out-of-game issues, but that doesn't justify Sean in any way for being an absolute bastard and talking crap behind OP's back, among other shitty things. I wish the OP luck in his games, and at least he now has one less toxic person in his life. D&D player accuses everyone of being a pedo in order to justify random acts of murder, by Droman the Dragon. I am my friend group's forever DM. About 6 months ago, a friend moved back to town after graduating college, which means that the friend group were all in the same place since, well, high school, which was pre-pandemic. We never really got into online D&D, so with everyone back in town, we decided to have another campaign. The returning friend rolled up a human rogue. The other relevant player would roll up a kobold cleric, and I, being a bit tired of DMing, ended up playing as a half-elf sorcerer. The party met in the classic town tavern intro scene to meet a knight's captain to get their first intro quest, to get them to at least level 2 before I send the party off into the sandbox that was my campaign. Right off the bat, the human rogue sees the kobold cleric and says, "I didn't know this job involved a damn priest." Kobold explains that he's not a priest in the traditional sense, but an adventurer who met a god who grants him power. Rogue decided to let this go for now, but made clear that he was watching him and his phony baloney gods. So the party finished their intro quest and decided to head to the coastal city-states to find out why monster activity is increasing and to get paid handsomely to kill them. When they got to the nearest coastal city, they were granted audience by the city's grand priest, who is leading the city after the royal family was killed by a lich. Rogue ignored everything that was just explained and said, "Why the fuck did they allow a fucking priest to run the city?" The party and the priest tried to calm him down, and he said, "If you cross me, holy man, I'll send you to meet the gods you love so much." When the priest then took us to his temple to unveil a secret dungeon where a magic sword that once belonged to the lich lied, Rogue said, "I bet you there is a trove of kids down in that dungeon. We are dealing with a priest after all." The priest took offense at the allegation and told them he isn't hiding the dungeon. He can go investigate himself if he so wants. Rogue said, "Why? So you can kill us and keep your filthy secrets, you pedophile?" We were all like, "What the fuck?" And before we could respond, he said, "I use sneak attack to kill that filthy pedophile priest." We all begged him to stand down, but it was too late. We were now locked in battle with the Grand Priest and his Knight Order, Homeward Paladins. Keep in mind, we were still level 3. The first 2 rounds made it abundantly clear that we were going to lose. We ended up fleeing the encounter and one party member died in the process. Cleric then lays into him when the rest of the party agree and freak out that we are now fugitives and will likely have to watch our backs. Rogue then lambasts us for siding with the cleric and accuses him of being one and the same with the Grand Priest. He backs down when he realizes that the rest of the party stands with the cleric, but he does say, "You had better watch yourself, holy man." We end up meeting our dead party member's new character, Ranger, and fleeing into a forest and getting surrounded by a group of orcs. They took us to their shaman, a half-orc and a really interesting character who we are able to reason with. Turns out, he has been working to discover the secret of the lich as well. He invites us to a feast so that we can make alternative plans. Then, at the feast, As we get seated, Rogue demands to roll perception. He says that this feels suspicious. He's probably setting us up to get killed Red Wedding style. When he rolls a nat 1, DM says, "You don't notice anything." Despite this, once the shaman shows up, Rogue says, "I jump on the table and throw a surprise dagger in that fucking orc shaman's neck." The party says, "Can we try to stop him?" But unfortunately it's sneak attack, so we can do nothing as he murders our only ally except beg him not to out of game and ask him why. We remind him that he failed his perception check, so even if he was sus, he wasn't, his character will have no ability to know. But he just responds, "He's an orc, and orcs are by definition savages who will rape, pillage, and murder everyone they can. Especially given the fact that he's a shaman, which is basically a priest for uncivilized savages. And we all know what priests do to kids. My character would never stand for that." We all groan and roll our eyes, and he says, "I attack and show no mercy. All the savages must die." He unfortunately rolls a crit, which kills the orc shaman, who was a level 1. The party in-game freaked out and attempted to tackle him, but it was no use. The orc tribe wouldn't back down, so we had to back down, take a shitload of opportunity attacks, and get 3 other players killed. Now it was just me, cleric, and rogue. Once we escaped, we told him that he had gone too far and that he needed to face consequences for his actions. Cleric told him that he must repent of his grave immoral behavior, and Rogue just couldn't help himself and said, "Silence, kid fucker!" and attacked him. I immediately joined in to help Cleric, and as the other 3 players rolled up their characters, they jumped into the fight against Rogue as they finished their character sheets, to which Rogue accused them of metagaming, but they just laughed and basically said in the most ironic way, "It's what our characters would do. We're bounty hunters, and you're a wanted man, my murderous friend." But Rogue, somehow, ended up escaping, and DM unironically said, "Ooh, I always wanted to run a split party." Yikes. And that's where we are right now. I have no idea how DM is going to run a split party with one renegade party member on his own murdering religious figures, but on the bright side, at least he's not with us anymore, so we can now, hopefully, actually progress the story without him being with us or rolling up another edgelord. TLDR. Player accuses random people of being pedos and kills them. He has killed a grand priest, an orc shaman, and nearly killed our party's cleric. He is now a fugitive. What the heck did I just read, honestly? So, I think it goes without saying that there's definitely some religious trauma going on here, some kind of unfortunate things that led this person to behave this way. I've seen a few stories where overly religious people come into games and get offended at the existence of a multi-deity pantheon in a fantasy game. I've also seen stories where zealots claim D&D is a satanic cult and we're all devil worshippers. This is the first time I've seen the inverse of that, the hardcore anti-religion stance in a D&D character. It's strangely bizarre, but I also know exactly the kind of person who would make this type of character in real life. Well, maybe not quite this annoying, but I know the kind of person who has this anti-religious stance in real life. There's a close friend of mine that grew up in a very religious family, the kind of religious that forces their kids to go to church and shames them for any kind of belief that doesn't follow their own. That kind of religious. Not saying that's how all churches are, for a fact they are not, but unfortunately there is a decent amount of those that are exactly like this, and that just makes children, young adults, young people hate religion as a whole, because that's all they know. This friend is now a hardcore aggressive atheist, the kind that thinks everyone who believes in a higher power is an idiot. And this is exactly the kind of person that I'm seeing here in this horror story. At baseline, this is someone who has had bad experiences with religion to the point where he can't separate their experience from fantasy cleric religion. The D&D cleric doesn't necessarily make you a priest in the classical sense. There's a lot of variations on the character, but clearly this person has problems identifying and separating fantasy from their real life issues. That being said, while I maybe can understand possibly where this person is coming from in terms of their behavior, this isn't anyone else's problem. Your religious trauma, or dislike for religion in general, is not anyone else's problem at the table. I do believe that ttrpgs can be used as mild therapy. Mild therapy. Not a therapy substitute, mind you, but as an accompaniment to actual therapy. I have a player right now who's using character's backstory to work through some trauma in his own past, but, and this is key, this is something that was discussed beforehand with myself and the rest of the players to make sure that one's venting is not going to trigger and upset a different player. You never know, especially in a game you find on r/LFG, you never know what kind of issues or triggers or problems other people have, and you don't want your random dropped on everyone's head venting to upset someone else, because that's just not fair. Everyone is here to have fun, and if they didn't agree, specifically actually agree for this kind of therapy to be implemented into the game, then you shouldn't be doing it. Don't do that to people. It's not fair to everyone else. Furthermore, I only recommend doing this kind of therapy supplement with a group of people you are familiar with. And again, only if they're explicitly okay with it. They have to specifically state, yes, I agree, this is fine. And they always have the right to take that back, to say, this is too much for me, let's dial it down, let's dial it back. Strangers on the internet are not going to be able to help you the way a professional can. So I once again say that ttrpgs can be used as a therapy supplement. They should not be used as a replacement for actual therapy. This person, and I don't want to diagnose, I am not a clinical psychologist, psychiatrist, I'm not a licensed therapist, I just have a psych minor and a lot of opinions, but I think this, in this story, is at the very least an indication of some issues that maybe the person wants to talk to a therapist about. If you don't like something to the point where it's affecting your ability to separate real life from fantasy life, you should probably talk to someone about that. And it should not be the rest of the party at your D&D table. That being said, you should never, and I mean never, use your prejudice, and this is prejudice, this is baseline objective prejudice, to ruin someone else's experience. This is the biggest problem I see here. Aside from pedo jokes, which is a huge accusation, honestly, you should not be making accusations like that on the spot, even in a fantasy game. The biggest issue is the problem player doesn't care that he's ruining the game for the rest of the party. He's ruining their plans. He's using the age-old excuse of, this is what my character would do, to justify disruptive behavior. He's gotten characters killed, which is just unfair and really upsetting. I know how that feels. And he doesn't seem to care. Worse still, he is aggressive to one of the party members, and anyone who's watched my videos knows how I feel about PvP in my games. The thing I am more shocked by, because, okay, everyone expects an a-hole player in these games. This is RPG horror stories after all. I am more shocked by the DM, and the fact that he's okay with this, because nowhere in the story does it say that the DM steps in. The rest of the party are trying to stop this one guy from effectively ruining the entire campaign for them. And the DM is just like, it's sneak attack, so it works. That's not how sneak attack works. You can still stop the initial attack for starters. And also, why is the DM allowing it? He could have just said no the first time, or the second time, or any of the times, really. He could have been like, hey, stop it. And he seems to be fine with all that's going on. I just don't understand. Maybe there's an explanation, but I personally don't understand. One of my most frustrating experiences as a DM ever was when a player made up when my player was talking to an NPC and was just making up how they're evil. Like, making up evil, nefarious intent in this character that wasn't there. And it was really frustrating for me because I was trying to figure out what I was saying that was making this character believe this guy is like the worst. And this led to the NPC arguing with this player, and the rest of the party were kind of, not trying not to upset the player, so they were kind of like, oh yeah, okay, we'll go with this. And it ended up costing the party an ally that was allied with an organization that really would have helped them, and I still don't know why. I still don't know what it was in the words I said that upset this character so much, that made them so paranoid. And besides that, the DM wants to run a split party? For how long? It doesn't sound like the group wants the problem character back, and well, they shouldn't. And so what, does the DM just intend to run them separately forever? Or make the problem player into the BBG? But then, why would you be running a separate thing for them? Just make them the BBG. At that point, the player loses control of that character and becomes an NPC, player makes a new character. Either way, I don't think the DM understands just how much work that would be. Because you either run two separate games, essentially. One of which is single player, which is a lot more work than multiplayer games for some reason. Or you run one game, but it's split between two sections, so the problem player gets so much more spotlight, and the rest of the players are just sitting there for half the game? ? I don't think that's just sustainable. It's not gonna be fun for the rest of the party at the very least. Splitting the party is generally a bad idea, even if it's short term. And in this situation is just going to ruin the game. Just don't do it. Here's hoping that the DM comes to his senses and either kicks the problem player or has a serious talk with him so he can make a new character that's not an anti-religion jerk. It's fine and okay and acceptable to have your opinions about religion. Everyone is entitled to like, dislike, think whatever, follow religion, be an atheist. That's fine, but it's not okay to use your in real life problems with something to create chaos and basically ruin people's enjoyment of the game. It's not their problem. You did not come to D&D to talk about religion. This is not a debate. It's also not okay to make accusations of someone being a pedophile for no reason. Just straight up no reason. I know it's a fantasy game and none of these priests actually exist, but that's a pretty big accusation, and I know if my character was accused of it, I would be very uncomfortable, because this is just not something that you should be doing. That's weird. Don't do that. And that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it was only 2 stories this time, but I am trying to make the video not be overly long so I can get it out faster to get back on track. If you stayed all the way to the end, thank you! If you have feedback, feel free to leave it in the comments. I'm always looking for constructive criticism. If you enjoy listening to me rambling on about RPG things, please leave a like and a subscribe. I'm hoping to get back on track with my schedule and have more videos up soon. As always, have a good day, night, weekend, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheerios!